Hello, welcome to the basement. David Bradley here. Yes, it's time for another installment of The Wisdom from Playboy, which actually means we're going to continue with the article about All the President's Men by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, or Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. And it is a lengthy article, that's why I have done it in a number of pieces here. Just a moment. They have these sort of natural breaks in here with these three periods in between. So the last we were doing, I'll back up by about a paragraph. Woodward took one of his giant paper clips, bent it into a large L, and began twirling it in his hand as he read over his notes. At that moment, Bradley walked by his desk and asked what was up. Maybe a whole lot, and maybe nothing, Woodward said, but there was at least one witness who could do some damage to Mitchell, Colson, Ehrlichman, and Dean. Bradley's eyes brightened. He did a little dance, holding an imaginary towel to his ass, and wiggled it back and forth before walking away. On February 26, Bernstein stepped into the elevator in the post lobby and suddenly felt his arm grabbed and then his body being pulled back into the lobby. He started to struggle, then heard a female voice. "Boy, am I glad to see you." It was Laura Kiernan, a young news aide who had recently been promoted to reporter on the local staff. "There's a guy upstairs in the newsroom with a subpoena for you and your notes. Bradley doesn't want you to go up there. He wants you out of here fast." Bernstein dashed to a stairwell at the end of the lobby, then up 7 flights of steps to the accounting department. Closing the door of an office, he dialed Bradley's extension. Woodward was off for a few days in the Caribbean, but they had long before agreed on what to do if they were subpoenaed. Turning over notes or naming sources in either a grand jury proceeding or a judicial hearing was obviously out of the question. There would be plenty of time to fight that in court. The first thing to do was move their files to a safe place. Bernstein told Bradley where the files were. They would be moved immediately, he said. CRP had issued subpoenas for 5 people at the Post: Bernstein, Woodward, Jim Mann, who had worked on some of the initial Watergate stories, Simmons, and Mrs. Graham. Also reporters from the Washington Star-News, the New York Times, and Time magazine. Simmons and Mrs. Graham, the only non-reporters on CRP's list, had already been served. The subpoena demanded that those served testify by deposition in one of the civil suits arising from the break-in and bring with them all notes, tapes, and story drafts in their possession regarding Watergate. Bradley told Bernstein he couldn't find the Post lawyers, and he didn't want him served until he'd heard their advice. "Get out of the building," he said. "Go to a movie and call me at 5 o'clock. Bernstein went to see Deep Throat, the movie version. When he called Bradley at 5, the editor told him to return to the office and explain the strategy. Bernstein would accept the subpoena. Custody of at least some of the reporter's notes would pass to Mrs. Graham. Of course we're going to fight this one, all the way up. And if the judge wants to send anyone to jail, he's going to have to send Mrs. Graham. And my God, the lady says she'll go. Then the judge can have that on his conscience. Can't you see the pictures of her limousine pulling up to the Women's Detention Center, and out gets our gal, going to jail to uphold the First Amendment. That's a picture that would run in every newspaper in the world. There might be a revolution." That night, Bernstein was at his desk, typing when he saw the CRP page hurrying down the middle aisle. Arm outstretched, Bernstein continued to type. "Carl Bernstein," head down. Bernstein raised one arm and picked off the subpoena, but the page stood there silently. Finally, Bernstein glanced up from the typewriter. The page looked about 21, tousled blonde hair, wearing a V-neck sweater, very collegiate. "Hey, I really feel bad about doing this," he said. "They picked me because they thought somebody who looked like a student could get upstairs easier. He was a law student who worked part-time at the firm headed by Kenneth Wells Parkinson, the chief CRP attorney. He promised to keep alert for any information that might be useful to the Post, and he gave Bernstein his home phone number. I'm going to read some more. Even though there's a natural break here, I'm going to carry on. No presidential decision affecting Watergate seemed so ill-advised or left the reporters more perplexed than the White House announcement in February that L. Patrick Gray's name would be submitted to the Senate for confirmation as J. Edgar Hoover's permanent successor. Gray was already the acting FBI director. His confirmation hearings would almost certainly become a congressional inquiry into the FBI's conduct of the Watergate investigation. Why risk the possible consequences of a senatorial fishing expedition to make his tenure permanent? The administration officials, to whom the reporter posed the riddle, seemed no less baffled. Several insiders professed to know only that there had been a mammoth struggle in the innermost Nixon circle. Oh, dear me. Ehrlichman, it was said, had vehemently opposed the nominations, but the president had ultimately rejected his counsel. No one suggested that Gary had been nominated because of ability or because the White House regarded the hearings as an opportunity to set the Watergate record straight. Shortly before the hearings were to begin, the reporters decided it was time for Woodward to move the flower pot on his balcony. That night he traveled by foot and cab to the garage. Deep Throat was not there. He had told Woodward that he would leave a message on a certain ledge when he couldn't make an appointment. Woodward, 5'10", couldn't reach that high. He found a section of old conduit pipe and fished around. Moments later, he found a piece of paper on which Deep Throat had typed instructions to meet the next night at a remote bar. Woodward had never heard a remote bar Woodward had never heard of. A bar. Had Deep Throat gone crazy? Something must be wrong. When he got home, he looked up the bar in the phone book. There was no such listing. From a payphone in his apartment building, he dialed information. An operator gave him the listing and address on the outskirts of the city. At 9 the next night, Woodward walked a few blocks before taking a cab to a section of the city in the opposite direction from the bar. He walked another 15 minutes and took a cab to within a few blocks of the bar. It was really a tavern, an old wooden house that had been converted into a saloon for truckers and construction workers. Woodward, who was dressed casually, walked in. No one seemed to pay any attention to him. He spotted Deep Throat sitting alone at a side table and nervously sat down across from him. "Why here?" he asked. "A change," Deep Throat said. None of your friends would come here. Just a sleepy, dark bar." A waiter came over. They both ordered scotch. "There has to be more to this new meeting place," Woodward said. "A little bit classier surroundings," Deep Throat answered. "No chance you were followed. 2 cabs and all." Woodward nodded. "How'd the Post like its subpoenas?" "Just great," said Woodward. "That's only the first step. Our president has gone on a rampage about news leaks on Watergate. He told the appropriate people, go to any lengths to stop them. When he says that, he really means business. Internal investigations, plus he wants to use the courts. There was a discussion about whether to go the criminal route or the civil suit route first. At a meeting, Nixon said that the money left over from the campaign, about $5 million or so, might as well be used to take the Washington Post down a notch. Thus, her subpoenas and the others. Part of the discussion was about continued on page 196. Okay, let's read that now that I'm here. Part of the discussion was about starting a grand jury investigation. That's for later. Nixon was wild, shouting and hollering, "We can't have it, and we're going to stop it. I don't care how much it costs." His theory is that the news media have gone way too far and the trend has to be stopped, almost like he was talking about federal spending. He's fixed on the subject and he doesn't care how much time it takes. He wants it done. To him, the question is no less than the very basic integrity of the government and basic loyalty. He thinks the press is out to get him and therefore is disloyal. People who talk to the press are even worse. The enemies within, or something like that. Woodward took a deep breath. Deep Throat sipped his scotch gingerly, then wiped his mouth inelegantly with the back of his hand. How worried was he? Worried. Deep Throat leaned back and threw his arms over the chair. It can't work. They'll never get anyone. They never have. They're hiding things that will come out and even discredit their war against the leaks. The flood is coming, I'm telling you. So, the White House wants to eat the Washington Post. So what? It will be wearing on you, but the end is in sight. It's building, and they see it, and they know they can't stop the real story from coming out. That's why they're so desperate. Just be careful, yourselves and the paper, and wait them out. Don't jump too fast. Be careful, and don't be too anxious. Woodward was anything but reassured by his friend's assessment. He said he needed more details if he was going to tell the others at the post that they were on the menu, but weren't going to be eaten. Deep Throat shook his head, indicating that he could not say much more. What about Gray's nomination? Asked Woodward. That didn't make any sense. Deep Throat said it made all the sense in the world, although it was a big risk. In early February, Gray went to the White House and said, in effect, I'm taking the rap on Watergate. He got very angry and said he had done his job and contained the investigation judiciously, that it wasn't fair, that he was being singled out. Oh, let me read that again. Deep Throat said it made all the sense in the world, although it was a big risk. In early February, Gray went to the White House and said, in effect, I'm taking the rap on Watergate. He got very angry and said he had done his job and contained the investigation judiciously, that it wasn't fair that he was being singled out to take the heat. He implied that all hell could break loose if he wasn't able to stay in the job permanently and keep the lid on. Nixon could have thought this was a threat, though Gray is not that sort of guy. Whatever the reason, the president agreed in a hurry and sent Gray's name up to the Senate right away. Some of the top people in the White House were dead set against it, but they couldn't talk him out of it. So good Pat Gray had blackmailed the president. What is this? Now at the top of this it says, oh, okay, right, okay, never mind. So good, Pat Gray blackmailed the president. I never said that, Deep Throat laughed. He lifted his eyes. The picture of innocence. What about the Time magazine story that claimed that the administration had wiretapped the phones of reporters and White House aides? Had Gray been aware of the taps? Affirmative, said Deep Throat, and he cautioned that even he did not know all there was to know about the subject. There was an out-of-channels vigilante squad of wiretappers and burglars that did it, including taps on Hedrick Smith and Neil Sheehan of the New York Times after the Pentagon Papers publication. But it started before that. All the records have supposedly been destroyed. He explained that the wiretapping had been done by ex-FBI and ex-CIA agents who were hired outside of normal channels. Robert Mardian had run the Justice Department end of the operation for the White House. Watergate was nothing new to the administration, Deep Throat continued. There had been an election strategy session at which Haldeman pushed Mitchell to set up a wiretapping operation for the campaign. Mitchell had been reluctant, but Haldeman was insistent. Mitchell was instructed by the White House Chief of Staff to transfer part of the vigilante operation from the White House to the campaign. That meant Hunt and Liddy. In 1969, the first targets of aggressive wiretapping were the reporters and those in the administration who were suspected of disloyalty. Deep Throat said Then the emphasis was shifted to the radical political opposition during the anti-war protests. When it got near election time, it was only natural to tap the Democrats. The arrest at the Watergate sent everybody off the edge because the break-ins could uncover the whole program. Deep Throat and Woodward each had another scotch. Luxuriating in the unfamiliar comfort of their meeting place, Woodward wondered if his friend was intentionally flirting with the danger of being discovered. Did Deep Throat want to get caught so he would be free to speak publicly? Woodward started to ask, then faltered. It was enough to know that Deep Throat would never deal with him falsely. Some day it would be explained. The drinks were cheap. Woodward put a $5 bill on the table and left first. There is more, but I'm not going to read it now. There's a little bit here, like a little postscript or something, even though it's on the end. But somewhere there must have been an... Oh, there it is. There's an asterisk here. Stephen Sachs, Gray's attorney, told Woodward in early 1974 that the suggestion that Gray had pressured or blackmailed the president was outrageously false. Gray went to the White House expecting not to get the job, Sachs said. Nixon told him that he should be as ruthless as Hoover in stopping leaks and be aggressive in the use of polygraphs. Sachs said that pressuring the White House was not the way Gray handled himself with those guys. It was plain fear most of the time. Now it makes perfect sense that some of those guys down there would think he might be pressuring, because that's the way they operate, but not Gray. So, that is enough for now. It's funny in these. I'm not going to say much about what's going on in the world these days, because there's a lot of bad things going on in the world these days. But it's funny how the words loyalty and disloyal come back around again, around again, around and round they go. Oh dear. Can't we all just get along? Anyway, I will read more, but not today. Have a lovely day, evening, morning, afternoon, and I hope you're happy, healthy, and content, and that life is good. And indeed, can't we all just get along and occasionally agree to disagree? And wait for it, compromise. Compromise for the good of whatever country, whatever city, whatever county, whatever town, whatever hamlet that we happen to live in. Compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word. It's not a dirty word. Some people say it's a dirty word. It's not a dirty word. Deal with people. Make deals. And if you're not happy with what the deal is, and no one ever is completely happy, and the next time it's time to negotiate, maybe it's a contract or something. You keep in the back of your head, okay, we would have been, we should have tried for this, or we should have tried for that, or whatever. It's funny, when I was the president of the Sarasota, Sarasota Manatee County Amiga Users Group. Sarasota Manatee. No, just Sarasota Manatee Amiga Users Group. We'd have all kinds of things come up, and nothing was written in stone. And if we made a decision that then we looked back on and said, maybe we need to, adapt that, we would adapt it and not look bad doing it, because at the time we made the decision, it seemed to be the best thing. It seemed to make sense, but circumstances change. Things happen. So you have to be adaptable and compromise and work with people And here's the big thing, and this is something I do at school all the time. Even if somebody is absolutely wrong, wrong as wrong can be, let them speak. Let them get it out, and let them feel that even though you're not perhaps going to follow their advice, that it was considered. And maybe there's something in there you can tweak a little bit and say, well, we really didn't, your ideas really didn't do it, but here's a little tweak. Or even still, point out why it is that you're not going to. In other words, don't just say, oh, I don't want to hear it. Talk to the hand. Don't want to hear it. Don't tell it. Whatever. That just gets people mad. And then they take revenge. So make sure people are heard. Make sure people are valued. Make sure people are listened to, even if they're dead wrong. It's funny how many times, and I know this is off topic from the next thing, but how many times I've had kids who have come up to me and they have sworn at their teacher. And I think, oh, it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. Oh. And mind you, when they say that, I'll look at them and say, do you think that was a good career move? Anyway, I said, look, it's okay. You were mad, you were angry, you were whatever. This can work out. You can recover from this. This is a learning opportunity. And, one of the first things I said, go down to the office. I'll take you. Go down to the office. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you said. Don't not say what you said. Tell them what you said. And that will be the start of the healing. And will the teacher be happy that you swore at them? No. Will they get over it? Yes. But the best thing is, don't deny that you did it. Because everybody heard you say it. And if you deny, then it all becomes the cover-up. Back to, wait for it, Richard Nixon. It was the cover-up that got him. True, the things he did were not good. And sort of like Bill Clinton, it wasn't what he did. It was the cover-up, that he lied about it. If he immediately had come out and said, I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, but we did do some things together. And she may have a blue dress that has some DNA evidence on it. And, I was weak. It would have been over. He wasn't impeached, although he wasn't kicked out of office. But he wasn't impeached for what he did. He was impeached because he lied about what he did. So, as I've said many times, maybe not here, but David Letterman handled his scandals the best of anybody. Tiger Woods, the absolute worst. Nixon, not good. And then, of course, we have our current people who are running for offices in the United States. And that's a whole other story. And considering what's just happened in the world, I'm not going to talk about that now. But I would be very disappointed if everyone is talking about lowering the temperature on the rhetoric if he who rose the temperature on the rhetoric first and continues to up until very recently, we'll see if he comes out and inflames the situation. I will just shake my head and say, oh, I just don't believe it. I would like to think that he who just went through a potentially near-death experience will have learned something from this. And you know what? If I was running for office, you know what I would say? He's okay or she's okay. Sure, they could do a fine job, but I just know I could do better. I know I have better policies. I know I have better ideas. I know I have better people around me. I could do better. I wouldn't go into all the mudslinging and all of that. And if they did, I'd just say, yeah, well, some people say anything to try and get elected, but look, I'm wiser. I'm smarter. I'm got more experience. And you can trust me. Trust, imagine. Because when most everything that comes out of your mouth is a lie, the little boy who cried wolf. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about that. Anyway. Oh, the other thing with Nixon, if he burned the tapes, he wouldn't have resigned. He made them, he kept them, and that was the smoking gun. Anyway, I will read more Nixon stuff soon, and I am going to look for the other edition of Playboy that has supposedly the first part of this article in it. Once again, there are some things in here I've heard, but there's a lot of things in here I've never heard. Never, ever, 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 ever. I never heard that before that Woodward and Deep Throat met in some seedy bar and drank scotch and talked about things. Never, ever, 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 ever. No way, no how. Not in the movie, not in anything. It was always in the parking garage. But mind you, they're trying to squeeze as much as they can into a little movie thing. But there are details, and the devil is in the details. It is. So as much as they're trying to be loyal to the story, sometimes there just isn't time. There just isn't. So, thank you again for coming. Have a lovely day. I hope you're all safe and healthy. Bye for now.